Imagine the ground shaking beneath your feet. Not from thunder. From hooves. A black wall of riders crests the ridge ahead of you. Tens of thousands of Mongols, the most feared killing machine the world has ever known. And then, in a single afternoon, they begin to die. Not slowly. Not heroically. They die choking on dust, screaming with arrows in their throats, trampled by their own horses, cut down so completely that survivors will swear the mountains themselves turned against them. Here is the impossible question that should not exist in history. How did 30,000 desperate foot archers, hungry, outnumbered, written off as already dead, slaughter a Mongol army 4 times their size in just one day? You think you know the Mongols. You think you know medieval warfare. You don't. Not yet. Stay with me, because in this story, the closer you look, the worse it gets. In a few minutes, you'll see a Mongol prince humiliated in front of his own men, triggering a chain of rage that will cost tens of thousands of lives. You'll watch arrows fall so thick they blot out the sun, not as a metaphor, but as a physical, choking reality. You'll witness a moment so catastrophic that hardened steppe veterans will later say it felt like the world was ending. You'll reach a point where victory is already declared, only for everything to collapse in seconds. And finally, you'll learn the detail historians quietly mention, then move past, because it makes this battle almost too terrifying to explain. But first, stand where they stood. You are in Parwan, a narrow, brutal valley north of Kabul. Jagged ridgelines claw at the sky. The air is thin, cold, and sharp enough to hurt your lungs. Dust coats your tongue. Fear coats everything else. And marching toward you is the Mongol Empire. This is not a normal army. These men have annihilated cities larger than Paris. They have turned rivers red. They have broken Persia, smashed Khwarezm, butchered Baghdad's future before it was even born. When Mongols arrive, resistance usually lasts hours, sometimes minutes. Survivors are stacked into pyramids of skulls as warnings. You are not cavalry. You are not armored knights. You are foot soldiers. Archers. Farmers. City levies. Men who know, deep down, that Mongols are supposed to win. Every instinct in your body is screaming at you to run. And yet, you don't. Because behind you is everything you love. And in front of you is a commander who refuses to die quietly. His name is Jalal ad-Din Mingburnu. And before this day is over, the Mongols will curse it. But to understand how this slaughter became possible, you need to feel the despair first. The kind that crushes your chest before the first arrow is even loosed. The Mongols are coming south in the year 1221. Genghis Khan himself has unleashed them after the Khwarezmian Empire dared to insult him, executing his envoys, mocking his authority. That mistake has already erased entire civilizations. Jalal ad-Din is the last real hope of Khwarezm. Not a great empire anymore, just fragments, refugees, broken garrisons, men holding swords that should have been dropped weeks ago. He has been running, fighting, losing, watching cities burn behind him like funeral pyres for his world. And now Parwan is all that's left. You can smell it before the battle begins, the sour stench of sweat and fear, horse dung baked into dust, old blood soaked into the soil from earlier skirmishes. Men whisper prayers. Some sharpen arrows they know they'll never retrieve. Across the valley, Mongol banners ripple like dark wings. Their horses are calm. Too calm. Their riders laugh. They joke. They've done this 100 times before. One Mongol warrior, let's call him Arslan, a veteran of Samarkand, tightens his bowstring and scans the enemy lines. Foot soldiers. No heavy cavalry. No maneuver space. Easy, he thinks. Over by noon. He doesn't know yet that by sunset, the valley will be so clogged with corpses that horses will break legs trying to cross it. Jalal ad-Din rides the line, not in shining armor, not with pomp, but with a face carved by exhaustion and rage. This is a man who has watched his father betray him, who has been chased across half of Central Asia by the greatest army on earth. Every defeat has burned something away. What's left is dangerous. He stops beside a young archer whose hands are shaking so badly he can barely nock an arrow. "Look at me," Jalal says quietly. The boy does. His eyes are wet. "You will shoot when I tell you," Jalal continues. Not before. Not after. The boy nods. Jalal moves on. This army shouldn't exist. Half of them are survivors pulled from disasters. Some have no helmets. Some carry mismatched bows. Many know that if they lose, there will be no mercy. Mongols don't take prisoners here. This is the underdog setup that history barely explains properly. Not just outnumbered, but outmatched in doctrine, reputation, and psychological terror. And the Mongols know it. The Mongol commander this day is Shigi Kutuk, one of Genghis Khan's adopted sons. A man raised from captivity into power. Proud. Ambitious. Eager to prove himself worthy of the Khan's trust. This matters. Because pride kills faster than arrows. Shigi looks at the valley and sees a chance for glory. Jalal ad-Din has dared to stand and fight. That alone is an insult. Crush them, he orders. The Mongol horns sound. That noise, deep, animal, vibrating through bone, has ended armies before the first clash. Horses surge forward. Dust explodes upward. 30,000 Mongol riders begin to move as one living organism, hooves hammering like war drums. This is the moment when most armies break. But Jalal ad-Din does something that confuses even his own men. He raises his hand. And holds it. No arrows fly. The Mongols come closer. Closer. You can see their faces now, hard eyes, braided hair whipping in the wind. You can hear leather creaking, metal clinking, the snorting breath of horses. Your mouth is dry. Your fingers ache. Still, no arrows. The Mongols grin. And then Jalal ad-Din drops his hand. The sky screams. 30,000 bows release at once. The sound is not a twang, it's a tearing, like cloth being ripped by the gods. Arrows rise, then fall, then keep falling. Horses rear and scream as shafts punch into necks and chests. Riders tumble. Momentum carries the back ranks forward, slamming into the fallen. More arrows. No pause. No mercy. Arslan, the Mongol veteran, feels his horse shudder beneath him. An arrow punches through its shoulder. The animal collapses. He flies forward, hits the ground hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Dust fills his mouth. He tastes blood. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how Mongols lose. Shigi Kutuk's smile vanishes. He hadn't expected disciplined volleys. He hadn't expected terrain this tight. He hadn't expected foot archers to stand their ground like this. He orders another push. More Mongols surge forward. And again, the arrows. But here's the first thing history doesn't emphasize enough. These aren't random shots. Jalal ad-Din has drilled his men to aim low, into horses, not riders. A rider without a horse is a dead man in Mongol warfare. Horses pile up. Screams layer over screams. The valley floor turns slick. Still, the Mongols press on. And for a moment, just a moment, it looks like sheer numbers might overwhelm discipline. Then something goes wrong. Very wrong. But that comes next. This is where we pause, not because the story slows, but because it's about to accelerate into something far darker. You think the Mongols are losing control now? You think this is already the slaughter? No. What happens next will shatter morale, split loyalties, and turn a battle into a massacre so complete that even Mongol chroniclers will quietly step around it. This is only the beginning. That concludes the first part of the script. The Mongols pull back. That alone should terrify you. Because Mongols don't retreat unless they are about to do something far worse. Dust hangs in the air like fog. Bodies twitch on the valley floor. Wounded horses scream. High, broken sounds that drill into your skull. Arrows stick out of flesh at wrong angles. Men choke on blood and dirt. You think, maybe, just maybe, that you've survived the worst of it. You haven't. Shigi Kutuk reins his horse hard, jaw clenched so tight it hurts. He looks at the field. Too many bodies. Too much chaos. This was supposed to be simple. A punishment campaign. A demonstration. Instead, he's just watched elite Mongol cavalry, men raised in the saddle since childhood, die helplessly in front of foot archers. That humiliation burns. And humiliation is poison to a Mongol commander's mind. Change formation, he snaps. This is where arrogance creeps in. This is where the battle tilts on something so small, so human, that historians almost miss it. Shigi orders his men to dismount. Imagine that. Mongols. Dismounting. The logic seems sound, on paper. Close the distance on foot. Reduce exposure to volleys. Use shields, use numbers, force melee. But Mongol doctrine is built on movement. On speed. On horses as extensions of the body. Take that away, and you strip them of what they are. Some of the veterans hesitate. Arslan, still alive, crawling toward cover, hears the order shouted down the line. His stomach tightens. He's fought on foot before. He knows what it means. This is desperation. Still, orders are orders. Thousands of Mongols swing down from their horses. They form dense infantry blocks, shields up, spears forward. Drums beat. Slowly, painfully, they begin to advance uphill. And Jalal ad-Din sees it. This is the moment. The moment no one else would dare to seize. He shouts commands. Runners sprint. Archers shift positions, climbing higher up the slopes, spreading along ridgelines. The higher they go, the deadlier the angle becomes. Gravity joins the fight. The Mongols advance. Arrows fall again, this time shorter arcs, steeper plunges. Shafts punch through shoulders, thighs, faces. Shields shatter. Men stumble, trip over corpses, crash into each other. You can hear bones snap under boots. A Mongol named Borchu, barely 20, fighting in his first major campaign, feels an arrow punch into his calf. He goes down screaming. Someone steps on his hand. Another man falls across his chest, crushing the breath out of him. He thinks of home. Of grasslands. Of a mother he'll never see again. And no one stops. This is what infantry slaughter looks like when it happens to an army that was never meant to fight this way. Still, sheer mass pushes some Mongols close enough for hand-to-hand fighting. Swords clash. Axes bite. Men scream as steel finds flesh. For a few minutes, just a few, it looks like the Mongols might break through. This is the first false ending. Because right as the line wavers, everything collapses. A Mongol officer shouts a contradictory order. Another officer counters it. Signals get lost in the noise, the dust, the screaming. Units hesitate. Some push forward. Others pull back. And Jalal ad-Din does not hesitate. He orders a concentrated volley on the center. Thousands of arrows slam into a tightly packed mass of men. You hear it before you see it, a wet, ripping sound, like meat being torn apart by machines. Men drop in clusters. The formation buckles inward, collapsing under its own weight. Panic ignites. And panic spreads faster than fire. Mongol warriors start turning back, not in formation, not tactically, but individually. They rush toward their horses. Except their horses are behind them. Except the path is clogged with bodies. Except arrows are still falling. Arslan finally reaches his horse. He grabs the reins, hauls himself up, heart pounding so hard he thinks it might burst. He kicks, and the horse surges forward, straight into chaos. He rides over men. Over bodies. Over friends. This is no longer a battle. This is a rout. Shigi Kutuk realizes it too late. He screams for order, for regrouping, for discipline. But discipline dies when survival takes over. And then, something even worse happens. A rumor spreads. No one knows who starts it. Maybe a wounded man. Maybe a panicked officer. Maybe fear itself gives it a voice. The Khan is dead. That's all it takes. If Genghis Khan is dead, then everything changes. Loyalty fractures. Fear multiplies. The unthinkable becomes possible. Men run. They don't just retreat. They flee. Down the valley. Through narrow passes. Over rocks slick with blood. Jalal ad-Din watches, chest heaving, eyes burning. He could hold. He could consolidate. Instead, He orders the pursuit. This is madness. Foot soldiers chasing Mongols? Except these Mongols are no longer the hunters. They are prey. Archers move forward, firing at retreating backs. Men hurl javelins. Some pick up Mongol bows from the dead and use them against their former owners. A Khwarezmian soldier named Yusuf, who lost his brother to Mongol raiders months earlier, catches a fleeing Mongol by the leg, drags him down, smashes his skull with a rock until it caves in. He doesn't scream. He smiles. By mid-afternoon, the valley is a killing ground. The Mongols try to regroup on higher ground, but the terrain betrays them. Narrow ridges force them into bottlenecks. Panic compresses them further. And then comes the moment even chroniclers struggle to describe. One Mongol unit, several thousand strong, reaches a ravine. There's no bridge. No safe crossing. Behind them, Khwarezmian arrows whistle closer. Some try to climb down. They slip, fall, break, pile up. Others jump. Men hit rock with sounds like sacks of grain being dropped from towers. Bones shatter. Skulls split. Those who survive the fall are finished by arrows or blades. By sunset, the ravine is filled with bodies. Shigi Kutuk escapes, but barely. His army is shattered. Tens of thousands are dead or missing. This is the miracle. The impossible slaughter. And yet, this is not the end of the story. Because victory has consequences. And Jalal ad-Din is about to learn that surviving the Mongols is sometimes worse than dying to them. That's where the story turns dark again. Because while Parwan becomes a legend whispered in terror among Mongol camps, it also plants the seed of Jalal ad-Din's destruction. The army celebrates. Men laugh hysterically. Some cry. Others collapse from exhaustion beside piles of dead enemies. They believe, finally, that the Mongols can be beaten. That belief will kill them. That concludes part 2. The night after Parwan doesn't feel like victory. It smells like rot. Thousands of bodies lie where they fell, bloated already in the cold mountain air. Blood pools in low ground, dark and sticky, clinging to boots. The wounded moan through the darkness, friend and enemy alike, voices blending into a single, endless sound of suffering. Fires flicker weakly, casting shadows that look like grasping hands. Men don't sleep. They sit. They stare. They replay moments in their heads over and over again. Because something like this isn't supposed to happen. 30,000 foot soldiers did not just defeat a Mongol army. They annihilated it. And that creates a dangerous feeling, one that creeps into campfires and whispered conversations. Invincibility. Jalal ad-Din walks alone among the fires. His armor is dented. His boots are soaked. He steps around corpses without looking down. His face doesn't soften. It never really has. He knows something the others don't. The Mongols do not forgive humiliation. They do not forget. And they do not stop. Far away, beyond the mountains, Shigi Kutuk rides through the night with what remains of his army. He does not look back. He does not speak. His men are silent too, not out of discipline, but because there is nothing left to say. When they finally reach safety, messengers ride hard to find Genghis Khan. And when the Khan hears what happened at Parwan, witnesses say he doesn't shout. He doesn't rage. He simply goes quiet. That is worse. Because Genghis Khan understands something every general fears: a myth has been broken. And broken myths must be destroyed completely, or they spread. But before the Mongol response comes, Jalal ad-Din's victory begins to rot from the inside. It starts small. Always does. A dispute over loot. Mongol bodies carry riches, fine bows, armor, silver, horses. Spoils pile up faster than anyone can count them. Commanders argue. Tribal leaders accuse each other of stealing. Old rivalries flare. Jalal ad-Din tries to impose order. It fails. One night, voices rise. Then fists. Then blades flash. By morning, blood stains the camp again, this time Khwarezmian blood. Several factions simply leave. They take their men. Their horses. Their victory stories. They ride away into the mountains, chasing glory, safety, or revenge, no one really knows. Jalal ad-Din watches them go. And for the first time since Parwan, doubt flickers across his face. Because he knows what's coming. He sends scouts. They return pale. The Mongols are coming again. Not a detachment. Not a punishment force. The Khan himself. Genghis Khan has taken Parwan personally. He gathers an army so large the ground trembles days before it arrives. Veterans. Heavy cavalry. Men who survived massacres and learned from them. This is not arrogance marching south. This is correction. Jalal ad-Din's army, what's left of it, moves fast. They can't hold Parwan again. Not without unity. Not without numbers. They retreat toward the Indus River. And this is where the story becomes tragic. Every village they pass looks at them with hope and fear. Hope, because these are the men who beat the Mongols. Fear, because the Mongols follow wherever they go. Some villages refuse them entry. Others beg them to stay. Jalal ad-Din keeps moving. He knows the rule, never let the Mongols catch you pinned. The Mongols close in anyway. Skirmishes break out daily. Rearguards are wiped out. Scouts vanish. At night, Mongol horns echo from hillsides, denying sleep, grinding nerves down to nothing. A soldier named Hamid, one of the archers from Parwan, begins to shake uncontrollably. He can't string his bow anymore. His hands won't obey him. He whispers to a friend, "We already won. Why are we still running?" The friend doesn't answer. Because deep down, they both know the truth. Parwan was a miracle. Miracles don't last. The Mongols finally catch them near the Indus. This time, there is no valley to protect them. No ridgelines. No perfect killing ground. Just open land, and a river at their backs. Genghis Khan himself rides forward to observe. He watches Jalal ad-Din's army form up. He studies their banners, their formations, their exhaustion. He recognizes talent. And he respects courage. But respect does not mean mercy. The battle that follows is not Parwan. It is a collapse. Mongol cavalry encircles. Feigned retreats draw units out of position. Arrows cut down officers. Command collapses. Men panic. Jalal ad-Din fights like a man possessed. He charges again and again, cutting through Mongols, rallying his men, refusing to accept reality. At one point, Genghis Khan is said to have pointed him out to his sons. "That man," he says, "is how a son should fight." High praise. Still, Jalal ad-Din loses. His army breaks. Men run for the river. And then comes the final horror. Thousands throw themselves into the Indus, armor dragging them down, arrows punching into their backs as they swim. The river clogs with bodies. Blood streaks the current. Jalal ad-Din reaches the riverbank. He turns. Looks back at the battlefield. At the army he built. At the miracle he couldn't save. Then he does something so shocking that even the Mongols pause. He spurs his horse straight into the river. Not to swim. To leap. Horse and rider plunge off a cliff into the water below. For a moment, everyone thinks he's dead. Then, he emerges. Alive. Dragged by the current, battered, bleeding, but alive. Genghis Khan watches him disappear downstream. And he does not order pursuit. "Let him go," he says. The story should end there. A tragic hero. A lost victory. A broken empire. But Parwan doesn't disappear. It lingers. 4 years afterward, Mongol commanders train differently. They study terrain more carefully. They become more cautious around infantry in rough ground. They remember what arrows can do when discipline replaces fear. And among the conquered peoples of Central Asia, Parwan becomes a whispered legend. A reminder. The Mongols could be killed. They could be broken. Not forever. Not easily. But once, just once, 30,000 men stood their ground, and the greatest army on earth bled. And now, you know the real story. Not the myth. Not the footnote. The truth most people will never hear. Because history loves winners. But it's moments like Parwan, brief, brutal, almost erased, that prove something far more dangerous. Even empires built on terror can shatter, if fear breaks first. And that knowledge? That is why Parwan terrified the Mongols more than any city they ever burned. You think the story is finished. Most people do. They stop at the leap into the Indus. They call it poetic. They call it legendary. They wrap Jalal ad-Din in tragedy and move on. That is the third false ending. Because what happens after Parwan, and after the river, is darker, more brutal, and more revealing than the battle itself. Jalal ad-Din does not disappear. He survives. Barely. The river spits him out miles downstream, bruised, bleeding, half-conscious. Local villagers pull him from the water. They don't cheer. They don't celebrate. They look at him the way people look at a man carrying a curse. Because wherever Jalal ad-Din goes, the Mongols follow. He spends the next decade running, rebuilding, losing, rebuilding again. Persia, Afghanistan, India. Each time he gathers men who believe in the Parwan story. Each time he promises them that the Mongols can be beaten again. And each time, reality proves otherwise. Here's the part history hides behind footnotes. Parwan was not repeatable. It required a perfect storm of terrain, discipline, Mongol arrogance, and a commander willing to bet everything on one moment. Jalal ad-Din tries to recreate it. He never quite succeeds. Worse, victory changes him. The man who once inspired terrified foot soldiers to stand against Mongol cavalry becomes harsher, paranoid, violent. He executes suspected traitors. He alienates allies. Cities that once welcomed him begin closing their gates. A former supporter writes that Jalal ad-Din ruled like a man already dead. And in a way, he was. Because the Mongols never stopped hunting him. Genghis Khan dies in 1227. But the empire he built does not soften. His sons and grandsons inherit not just land, but grudges. Parwan becomes one of those grudges. Mongol commanders tell the story around fires, not as a defeat, but as a warning. Never underestimate infantry in broken ground. Never rush a narrow valley. Never assume fear will do your work for you. And never, ever, allow a symbol of resistance to live too long. Jalal ad-Din finally dies in 1231. Not in a grand battle. Not at the hands of Mongols. He is murdered by a Kurdish bandit while fleeing yet another defeat. Stabbed. Robbed. Left on the roadside. The man who once made the Mongols bleed out by the tens of thousands dies alone, unrecognized, his body stripped of armor and dignity. That is the cruelty of history. But Parwan does not die with him. Because something fundamental shifted that day in 1221. Before Parwan, Mongol invincibility was psychological as much as physical. Cities surrendered without a fight because resistance felt pointless. Armies broke before contact. After Parwan, doubt exists. Just a crack. But cracks matter. In Eastern Europe decades later, defenders choose forests and marshes. In China, infantry commanders emphasize terrain and massed missile fire. In the Middle East, chroniclers begin recording Mongol defeats, small ones, partial ones, but real. Parwan becomes the proof of concept. And here is the final uncomfortable truth, the one most textbooks avoid because it complicates the narrative. The Mongols did not lose at Parwan because they were weaker. They lost because, for one day, fear failed. Fear is the Mongols' greatest weapon. It always was. When fear breaks formations, battles are won before they begin. At Parwan, fear reversed direction. The Khwarezmian soldiers were still afraid, but they were more afraid of what would happen if they ran. And the Mongols, just for a few hours, felt something they almost never felt. Uncertainty. You can hear it in the accounts. In the pauses. In the justifications. In the way Mongol chroniclers rush past the battle and focus instead on later vengeance. Empires hate anomalies. Parwan is an anomaly soaked in blood. And now, finally, we reach the real ending. Not the leap. Not the victory. Not even the defeat. The ending is you. Because you now understand something that 99% of people never will. History is not a straight line of unstoppable forces crushing everything beneath them. It is moments. Moments where discipline beats terror. Moments where terrain beats numbers. Moments where human will, burned down to its rawest core, changes outcomes that should be impossible. Parwan lasted one day. One single day. And in that day, the most feared army in human history learned that they could die screaming in the dust like anyone else. That knowledge haunted them far longer than the bodies ever did. And now it belongs to you. You're still here. That matters. Because this is the part where most people stop listening, right when the story finally tells you what Parwan actually means. Not as a battle. Not as a legend. But as a warning written in blood. Let's go back to that valley one last time. Close your eyes and stand there again. The wind moves through Parwan, whistling softly over rocks and dried grass. It no longer smells like death. Time has taken care of that. Birds circle where arrows once fell. The ground looks ordinary now. But beneath your feet, the soil is darker. It has memory. Because Parwan is not famous for what it changed immediately. It's famous for what it proved. Every empire survives on a lie. Rome's was inevitability. Napoleon's was genius. The Mongols was fear. Not strength. Not numbers. Fear. Cities surrendered because terror arrived before the armies did. Commanders collapsed because resistance felt meaningless. Armies disintegrated because men believed defeat was already decided. At Parwan, for one day, that lie failed. And when a lie fails once, it can fail again. That's why Genghis Khan never allowed this defeat to stand unanswered. That's why Jalal ad-Din had to be erased, not just killed, but humiliated, reduced to a footnote, stripped of legacy. Because Parwan was contagious. Let me tell you one last human story. Years later, a Mongol officer, older now, scarred, rides through Persia with a younger recruit. They pass a ruined village. The recruit asks why the place was destroyed. The officer answers with one word. Parwan. That's all. No explanation. No embellishment. Just Parwan. Because among the Mongols, Parwan became a lesson whispered in training camps and command tents. It taught them caution. It taught them patience. It taught them that arrogance kills faster than arrows. But it also taught them something darker. That when resistance succeeds, it must be punished absolutely. That is why the Mongol response afterward was so merciless. Why cities were erased. Why entire populations vanished. Why the empire doubled down on terror. Not because Parwan weakened them. Because it frightened them. And fear, once felt, is never forgotten. Jalal ad-Din understood this too late. He thought Parwan meant the Mongols could be beaten regularly. He was wrong. Parwan was not a blueprint. It was a singularity. A moment where terrain, leadership, discipline, and desperation aligned so perfectly that even the greatest war machine on earth bled out in panic. That's why history struggled to place it. Too Mongol to ignore. Too inconvenient to celebrate. Too dangerous to mythologize fully. So it became a footnote. A line in a chronicle. A surprising defeat. But you now know what that phrase hides. You know about the arrows falling like rain until men drowned in dust. You know about horses screaming as they collapsed into each other. You know about infantry who didn't run when every instinct told them to. You know about a commander who gambled everything on discipline and terrain, and won, briefly, terribly, gloriously. You also know the cost. Victory did not save Jalal ad-Din. It did not save his empire. It did not stop the Mongols. What it did was simpler, and far more important. It proved that fear is not permanent. That even the darkest reputation can crack. And that sometimes, history turns not on who is strongest, but on who refuses to break first. That's why Parwan still matters. Not because 30,000 men killed 120,000 Mongols, but because, for one day, the world's most terrifying empire learned something every empire eventually learns. You can rule through fear. But the moment fear stops working, everything becomes mortal. And now, you carry that knowledge. Most people will never hear this story told honestly. They'll skim it. They'll dismiss it. They'll move on to the next conquest, the next massacre, the next unstoppable force. You didn't. You stayed until the end. And that means you don't just know what happened at Parwan. You understand it. And that, more than arrows, more than numbers, more than empires, is what truly survives history.